Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. The Premier League pays its respects to Cyrille Regis. He passed away this week at the age of 59. It's been agony, but the deal for Sanchez, it's almost done. Henrik Mkhitaryan, he's on his way to Arsenal as part of a swap deal, and a war of words has broken out between the Mike Ashley camp and Amanda Staveley over the failed sale of Newcastle United. Here to tell us about that and much more, Oliver Holt is the chief sports writer at The Mail on Sunday. Matt Dunn is a football reporter at the Daily Express. Neil Custis is the Manchester United correspondent at The Sun. Morning to you guys. Good to see you as ever. You two. Queensbury rules, OK? No gouging, no kicking, no spitting, no insults.
We've got croissants between us to fight over.
OK, touch gloves?
Yeah, there's going to be a battle of the buffet.
OK, let's get it on. Let's have a look at some of the papers this morning. Back page of The Sun, welcome to Manchester. Alexis Sanchez about to sign for Manchester United. Mkhitaryan on his way to Arsenal. Is this man on his way? Aubameyang at Dortmund. Is he coming to the Emirates? Did they need him yesterday? Scored 4 against Crystal Palace, a 4-1 victory over Roy Hodgson's side, 1 in, 1 out. That's the back page of the Star this morning. Alexis Sanchez in, Juan Mata on his way out, according to Paul Hetherington this morning. Belting story this from Steve Bates on the back of the Sunday People this morning. We've lost the cup. Well, we've certainly lost the plinth that the EFL Cup is mounted on. This is Manchester United. It's going to cost them a few quid to replace it before they hand it back ahead of the final next month. Sunday Mirror. More money on the way out of Manchester United, this time a new contract for Paul Pogba, heir of the Pog. That's the back page of the Sunday Mirror this morning, new contract for him. The Mail on Sunday, different story, completely different story. This is more revelations about the Qatari World Cup bid. 2022, of course, we'll be playing football there, we'll see a World Cup there. And no wonder, according to this story, because it's $100 million if you pick Qatar. That is Nick Harris this morning on the back page of the Mail on Sunday. Danny Taylor's column, all about Newcastle United. We're coming on to them later on in the show today. And the failed bid by Amanda Staveley to buy Newcastle United from Mike Ashley. And we'll come on to this man as well right now, which is Cyrille Regis and a former teammate of his at West Bromwich Albion. That's Martin Jol, of course, the former Tottenham manager as well, talking this morning about his former teammates and, of course, his dear friend Cyrille Regis, who passed away earlier this week at the age of 59. And that's where I'd like to start, Ollie, as well this morning. You wrote about him as well in your column, Cyrille Regis. Just give us an insight into what kind of player he was, what kind of person he was, and just how much he meant to the clubs that he played for in his career.
Well, I didn't know him as a person, Neil, unfortunately. I would very much have liked to have done, given everything that I've read about him and the testimonials, the tributes that have been paid to him. But I did see him, as all of us did, I'm sure, as a player when I was growing up. I watched him many times at Old Trafford and Main Road, and of course at the Hawthorns in particular. And he was an absolutely fantastic player. I mean, that was my main impression of him. He was a terrific centre forward. I mean, I think it's interesting how much the cultures have changed. I mean, I was aware, I suppose, of racial abuse being aimed at him, but probably only loosely because, as we may go on to discuss, it was a kind of cultural norm then, sadly. I mean, it's shameful when we talk about it now, but it didn't seem... At those grounds, it was so ordinary. That's the shameful thing about it, I think. And I think it really only... the climate of the times only really struck me when I was at Edgeley Park, where obviously it's a slightly more, not quite as many fans, and you're standing on the terraces there, and I remember very clearly the thing that always stayed with me, the abuse that was aimed at a Bradford City player called Cesc Pod, who was a left-back, and I remember being incredibly struck, even in those times, by the amount of abuse that he was getting and how sad and shameful it was. And I think that to me was the apart from his brilliance as a player, that was the significance of Cyrille Regis. That Cyrille Regis led players, stood up for players like Cesc Pod and led us out of those times. Helped by his example, helped to lead us out of those times and helped to lead us towards a situation where I think we are now, where there are certainly still plenty of problems, but a situation where we recognise at least that kind of abuse is absolutely not acceptable in any way. and it must not be allowed to gain a foothold. And I think Cyrille Regis, we owe him a huge debt for that.
He was, of course, one of the pioneers of that particular era, Matt. Just how much of an impact did he have on the modern game?
I think it was a huge impact. All of the players in that era did. Excuse me. I was only when he scored that goal against Norwich, which is when I can first remember thinking about him. I was 8, so I was perhaps a bit too young to remember him in his pomp. But the summer before that goal, I'd gone to Wembley for my first game, England game, and in a group with my dad and a few friends of his friends from work and acquaintances. And amongst our group was a young black lad who was about 13 in his England shirt, proud as I was. And I remember walking along Olympic Way and the abuse that he was getting as a fan from other England fans, so-called banter. And, this was a 13-year-old. Yeah, why aren't you wearing the Brazil shirt and all the rest of it? Supposedly harmless banter and, you shouldn't be here, all this sort of thing. And this is a fan who's paid money to come and watch. So what the actual players must be like Cyrille Regis only got to put on an England shirt 5 times, which is a shame. I think he'd win a lot more caps in this era. But those early players, the abuse they had to take, and through that, I think people have been educated. And I do think, although it's still not right in football, in many ways, sport has led society in terms of recognising these issues. And in a week where North and South Korea are uniting under a similar banner, I think you mustn't underestimate the strength that sport can be in society. And Cyrille Regis, as the 3rd black player to be capped by England, was right up there amongst those at the forefront, having to take the brunt of the abuse that was sent his way so that others who followed him had a relatively easier time of it. It's still not right, but his strength of character was an example for everyone.
He's certainly an ambassador for black footballers, but also I think that his family and also the supporters of the clubs that he played for, West Brom, Coventry City, Aston Villa, of course, Wolves, that they would remember a great footballer as well.
Well,
it's not just about a pioneer for black footballers in this country. We're talking about a great footballer as well.
You see, we don't know how much he intended to be a pioneer for black footballers. He just wanted to be, as far as I'm concerned, a great footballer, which he became, and he did it very much the hard way, not through coming through a football club. It was non-league pitches, and I think the then scout of West Brom, the board wasn't sure whether to buy him for £5,000, and the scout was so convinced, he said, I'll pay him myself if you don't think he's that good. And I think what he did was, rather than making big political statements off the pitch or this, that and the other, he purely did it through what he did on the pitch, and that shamed the people who abused him, because what he did was he thrilled the watcher, he thrilled the football lover. And there was a great quote from his widow this week saying quite simply how much he loved football and never stopped loving football, and you sense that when you saw him play. He very much reminded me of seeing a lot of pictures of him these last few weeks of Stan Collymore, his very, very best, that explosive burst of pace from the halfway line, and putting the ball away. And Ron Atkinson, who of course took him to West Brom and helped to make him famous, said that every goal he scored is a goal of the season contender. He wasn't super prolific, but what he did was score spectacular goals. If you actually look at his ratio of goals per games and all that, it wasn't obviously in the Lineker class, but you'll probably see more Cyrille Regis goals replayed possibly than Gary Lineker ones because of the explosiveness and power of it. So he was a trailblazer purely by his example on the pitch, shaking off all the problems that he was getting, the abuse he was getting, to produce, and that's what made a generation hold their heads up high and say, I can do this as well.
Was it important yesterday for the Premier League to remember him?
Yeah, I think so. And we can be a bit mawkish in football and celebrate passing of all sorts of characters. So I think you can tell by the way the fans took to it, not just at West Brom, but at other grounds, that it was a popular decision and that he was recognised. It's like Neil says, he played with the joy of the game, and that's what people love. People go to football because they love football. He loved football. And yeah, people recognise that in him. The
Man United fans at Burnley yesterday started chanting "One Cyrille Regis" through what was meant to be a minute's silence, but they started chanting "One Cyrille Regis," and that was the Manchester United fans. So who had actually been taken down by Cyrille Regis, you know, in a game at Old Trafford, particularly, I think, a 5-2. And I thought that was fantastic, because I think in times like this, the football community, despite the rivalries they have with club on club, do come together.
Yeah, there was a minute's applause where we were at the Emirates, but it was slightly strange, I think, that the Premier League appeared to need persuading to do it, because, as Neil says, actually, really events like reactions like that, like what the United fans did, they are the things that bring the football community together, and I think they're things that make you believe in the power of football and the kind of healing power of football. In some ways, we have enough bad news about football, and for somebody, the example of Cyrille Regis to bring people together, I think, was a huge thing. I'd say it was a surprise that the Premier League needed persuading about.
Do you not think it was also a mark from some fans of recognising how far we have come in England? And as you mentioned before, it's not sorted completely.
No.
But we know when we travel away in the Champions League, particularly to Eastern Europe, Spain, Italy, I mean, we're still now, we're back in England in the 70s.
Well, I think that Rhian Brewster stuff in The Guardian with Danny Taylor's interview,
yes,
made a point of saying, I mean, the problems aren't...
That's a Spain youth team. You'd think they'd be slightly more educated, about it all. But I think in this country, I think we do have to give credit to the steps that have been made, steps still to be made. And I think that minute's silence or minute's applause, either one it was, wherever you were, I think that was as much a recognition of how far we've come and a stand by football fans to say, this is in us. Because,
I agree with you about that, because also, if you remember that in the tributes that have been paid to Cyrille Regis this week, there's been a lot of... the footage of the Norwich game has been played quite a lot, and in the commentary, Gerald Sinstad, I think, says... just mentions the black players being booed. I think Laurie Cunningham's on the ball and is being booed, and it's... that wouldn't happen now, thankfully. Players would not be booed in this country because they're black, and that is progress. Not everything is right. There's still a lot of progress to be made, but we have made progress, thankfully.
Just a final point, Matt, before we move on. How will Cyrille Regis be remembered? What will his legacy be to English football?
Well, I think, as we've spoken about, as a pioneer in that sense, but just, as a joyful figure that represented his age. And, well, my binding memory will be that goal against Norwich. There wasn't so much football on the television then, and so when we did see something special, it really was special. So, I mean, that's how, bursting through that one he put past Peter Shilton early on. There's been a few clips that have been shown this week. But, I think he'll be remembered ultimately as a footballer.
But that's a good point, that there's not every goal was recorded then, was there? So there's probably so many goals. I remember I used to do Jimmy Greaves' column for our paper, and I remember him saying to me, he says, you know what, the longer it goes on, he says, the older I get, the better I get. He says, because people didn't actually see all my goals, but when they describe them, they're far better than actually scored. Yeah,
well, Cyrille Regis certainly scored some belting goals throughout his career. Some fitting and touching tributes this morning on the table. OK, that's Cyrille Regis, who passed away, sadly, earlier this week at the age of 59. OK, let's talk Sanchez. Neil, you were in the same attire that you wore last time you were on this programme. It must be Mourinho must have approved.
I'm still trying to move into hipster territory. I did a story the other day and I buried the intro 15 bars down. I'm getting there.
Right, OK. I thought Mourinho told you to wear it. Let's get on to Alexis Sanchez then.
More Pep, actually.
The greatest deal in history, the greatest heist. You must be pleased.
I think all Manchester United fans will be very pleased, because it is what they need, and I think this is a very, very good Manchester United team. Problem is, set against what Manchester City are doing, it's not recognised as that. But it lacks, and Mourinho's thought this for quite a while, it's just lacked that little bit of sparkle, that little bit of magic, that little bit of something different. It's got the power, it's got the pace, defensively it's excellent. Sorry, Oliver, but it is. I know it's...
He hasn't said anything.
I know keeping clean sheets upsets you, but, it's become part of the game recently, it seems. So they have the foundations to be a very good team, but they need that something different. And it's interesting that Manchester United sort of make these moves and have these moments in history where things can change. You know, obviously Cantona being the classic example, class of '92 coming through and what have you. And this could be another one, and particularly the fact that they've got him when it looked like he was going to Manchester City. And I wouldn't say Manchester City have been blasé about this, but it's almost bordering on it, as if to say, well, we're so far ahead, we're playing so well. I'm not saying they're going to catch them up this season, but this is a major move for Manchester United, and Manchester United have not suddenly become mugs overnight. They're not going to go away. They're not going to be happy. They're not going to become Arsenal and happy with fourth. They are still gunning for Manchester City and will be next season. And they're going to be 6 months ahead of schedule in those plans by getting Sanchez now. And I just think he'll give what is already a good team just that extra little lift. I think, you know, you've got to remember that Lukaku is still an excellent striker. Martial's still only 22 and is getting better under Mourinho. Lingard's getting better under Mourinho. Rashford has had a dip, will come back. And when all those things click with Sanchez in it, they've already got the base to be a good team. And I think it's a spectacularly good signing, and I think Ed Woodward deserves praise for it, and I think Mourinho does as well. But we have to remember that Oliver made a good point, dare I say it, this week when he said, you know, it's not like he's gone to Wickham for massive money. He's gone to Manchester United. Manchester United is still a big pull. You could argue it is a bigger pull than Manchester City for some people. You know, if Sevilla were top of the Spanish league, would someone go there rather than Real Madrid? It's still a massive pull, Manchester United, and always will be. And this is why, when this opportunity came, Sanchez has gone.
Is it a bigger pull right now?
I think it. You know, if you're going, Sanchez, if he joined Manchester City, is going to be a guest at a party that's already in full swing. If he goes to Manchester United, he can be somebody who can be looked back as a catalyst that took them on to another level where maybe not overhauling Manchester City, because Manchester City I can only see getting better, if that's possible, the way they're playing at the minute, but certainly a greater challenge. So I think it's... playing for Manchester United is still a huge pull, yeah.
You two are going to agree with each other, aren't you? Because your comment this morning is this is deal of the century stuff. This is the bargain.
But this is about attackers, not
defenders. £400-500 a week. This is a bargain.
I've heard Neil's Manchester United manifesto now, but actually, you're right. I think probably on this we do. On this we do agree. I think it's a great signing for United. I don't buy the stuff about Sanchez being a mercenary, particularly, and I don't buy the stuff about United being mad to pay the wages, or the fact they could have got him free in the summer. They couldn't have got him free in the summer because somebody else would have signed him by then. So I think it's a terrific signing for them. I mean, I think as far as City goes, United need him. United need him more than City do. I don't disagree. He still would have been a good signing for City. I'm not sure where he'd get in the City team. I mean, but I suppose they would have shoehorned him in somewhere. But United need him a lot more, which I think is probably they were. You know, there's an element of desperation in their attempts to sign him. But good luck to them. I think he will improve the side. Where will he get? Who do you think he'll displace?
I think he. No, I think he'll play. Well, I think he could change to a 3-5-2. If he did, that would be, you know, a lot more entertaining, Oliver.
Yeah.
So,
yes, well, we need that to be fair.
A lot less defensive, and goodness me, wouldn't that be marvellous? But I think he'll probably end up playing behind him, and Lingard, who is getting better, will play wide instead of Mata, because Mata, as good as he is on the ball, just he lacks a bit of pace. He's always substituted in every game. I'm not sure his influence is as great anymore, but I can see Sanchez in a 4-2-3-1. I can see him playing behind Lukaku and Lingard being on the right, and then Martial on the left, and that is then a heck of a front four, particularly with Pogba just behind, and now Matic is in there. Pogba's got more freedom to move forward, and suddenly you really have got a force there.
Really
if I'd have known we were going to get into the tactics, I'd have got the touchscreen in during the last break.
I can tell you about the back four and the keeper as well.
We'll get on to that.
Neil's very big on defence.
Oliver won't enjoy that.
In terms of principles and morals, has Sanchez done the dirty on Manchester City?
Yeah, basically. Well, someone's
you
going
nearly spat your tea out. You came so close.
Well, if you two, well, probably surprised at you two agreeing, I think. Well, I'm going to have to try and take something like a slightly opposite view to the pair of you. I mean, and it's along the lines that you've just suggested. what United... It's not a terrific signing for United, it's a necessary signing for United. They need a player who can add that spark. But because of where they are at the moment and because they're having to do their business in January and because they're not the biggest draw necessarily, last summer, for instance, Man City were the biggest draw for Sanchez, they're having to do this sort of backdoor deal that City wouldn't touch. And I think you're signing a player who is, A, brilliant, but also, when his team's at its lowest ebb, like Arsenal were against Bayern Munich, is sat on his haunches on the halfway line and causing division amongst the dressing room.
How's it a backdoor deal?
Well, they've stolen in once City... and City, I think Sanchez has been surprised... Guardiola's been surprised that Sanchez wasn't kind of more of a done deal this January after discussions in late August. There's been a question of money, and you talk about mercenariness. Ultimately, United paid the money, City wouldn't. And
why do you think Yaya Toure went to Manchester City from Barcelona? Do you think it was because he'd watched videos of Colin Bell from the 70s or something like that? Or did it have something to do with the paycheck?
Yeah, I think it had a lot to do with the paycheck. Tevez, which is reflected in there, another one who went to City after United.
Yeah. So City can't suddenly take this moral high ground and say, we're not paying that sort of money.
That's exactly the point I'm making.
No one can take the moral high ground. It's always about the money. It's not just about the money.
But it's switched now.
Not
but
just
it's starting,
City, not
it's
just
starting
United.
to look like that City are saying, we can't do this and ruin our wage structure and all that sort of thing. We're not going to go down that road. Hang on, they've been going down that road
but
since
didn't United try and take the moral high ground over Tevez?
Exactly.
Who ended up sulking on the bench? Didn't they rub their hands and say, well, that's what you get?
Over each other.
Nor can United claim anymore all this stuff about City buying the title. You know, the big clubs throw money at the situation. City haven't bought the title. City are winning. City are 12 points clear at the... they do to an extent.
Apart from Leicester. Manchester United buy the title. Their argument is, well, it's with our own money. Everyone buys the title to Leicester a certain extent.
Absolutely.
Leicester probably being the one we can say, well, maybe
Neil,
not.
If that's true, what are we watching? If teams really buy the title, what are we seeing in front of us?
Well, we're seeing this season something that's not as competitive as we've seen in other seasons. But I'm
Leicester
not...
City, did they buy the title?
This is in the same way you could argue that the New York Yankees have maybe bought the what do you call it again? What that they play over there? Rounders? What is it?
Baseball. Usually there is... To be fair, usually there is a correlation between the team who pays the most money in transfers and pays the highest wages with where they finish in the league. I think that's indisputable. But, I mean, I think... What has been so wonderful about this season in terms of the way Manchester City have played is that they're 12 points clear, not just because they've spent more money than Manchester United or Chelsea. They've only spent a bit more money than Manchester United or Chelsea, and yet they're 12 points clear. They're almost literally in a different league because of largely because of the coaching of Pep Guardiola.
No, but he started from a much better point.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
No, of course he did. He started from a much better base than Jose Mourinho did. Jose Mourinho came into a club that was... The spirit had gone, the players were fed up, they were playing that style of football that they didn't like. He had to unpick all that.
They just won the FA Cup.
The FA Cup, OK, yeah. Wigan had just won the FA Cup 3 years before that, and look where they are now.
So we don't count the FA... OK, we don't count the FA Cup.
No, I don't really count it anymore, no.
What Mourinho counts it? He was holding up 4 fingers or whatever it was.
That was the EFL Cup and the Europa League, and it was 3 fingers.
Yeah. So you count that? You count that, do you?
What?
You count the EFL Cup and the Community Shield.
What I'm saying is that the base which Guardiola came into with Aguero, Silva, Company, although he has his injuries, it was a team that had just got to the semi-finals of the Champions League. Mourinho came into a club where they'd just been knocked out in the last 16 of the Europa League, and that was the difference between the two clubs. City was still a very good team and a good squad. I don't think Manchester United was, so I think Mourinho's had an awful lot more work to do, and I think Guardiola had a much better starting point. I'm not denigrating what he's done, because they are fabulous to watch. They are the standout team, no doubt about it. Possibly one of the greatest teams we will see in Premier League history. But all I'm saying is, credit to Mourinho for the work he's done to get Manchester United back to the position they're in now.
Ollie, when you go to watch football matches, what do you want to see in front of you? Because I read your match report this morning from the Arsenal Palace game, and I got a sense that, OK, Alexis Sanchez has moved on, but you actually enjoyed what you saw in front of you. And
Exactly.
it didn't matter that it was Arsenal scoring the 4 goals. It didn't matter if it had been Palace scoring the 4. It just seemed that you enjoyed what you saw in front of you, and you saw 5 goals yesterday.
Look, I take Neil's points about there being merit in defensive excellence. I absolutely take that. That's fair enough. But so I accept that is part of football, and I accept that keeping clean sheets is part of football. But what excites me when I go to football is stuff like the first half or the first 22 minutes that we saw at the Emirates yesterday. What excites me is stuff like Lacazette's goal and the build-up to that goal, the interplay between Wilshere and Ozil, and what excites me is watching David Silva and Kevin De Bruyne. It doesn't excite me watching defensive masterclasses. I accept I can see the merit in it, and I can see the merit in what Mourinho does. He's a great manager. I've got no quibble with that at all. He's a great manager. But if you ask me, do I prefer the style of Guardiola or the style of Mourinho? I'd say Guardiola every time. Every single time.
Can I just take Guardiola out of it? Who would you rather go and watch, Spurs or Man United?
At the moment, I'd rather watch Spurs.
Arsenal or Manchester United?
Well, that's a difficult one because Arsenal don't play like they did yesterday.
All right, well, let's leave it at Spurs.
Time.
You'd rather go and watch Spurs. Who scored more goals this season, Manchester United or Spurs? Manchester United have scored more goals than Spurs.
Yes, they have, but when it comes to big games...
So are they just scoring functional goals?
I think there's an element of flat track bully about them. When they played big games, they shut up shop like they did against Liverpool. Now, I know that this Liverpool is a particular bone of contention for you and I saw your impassioned defence of Mourinho the last time you were on this show, which was extremely moving. But I think that OK, some people would say that was a good point. You say that was a good point. Yeah. But as you pointed out yourself on this show, at that time, Liverpool had won 1 in 8. OK, they were there for the taking at the time. They're not now. They're a different side now. They were there for the taking.
United, they weren't there for the taking.
Yes, they were.
They weren't.
Yes, they were. They got battered the next week by Spurs. They were there for the taking, but Mourinho didn't have the courage in his own players to go for that.
No. Klopp didn't have the courage in his players.
No, he did.
No, he didn't, because Klopp didn't go hell for leather at Man United. Every substitution he made was like for like. He didn't take one risk because he knew if he took a risk, he had a guy next to him who would take advantage of the hole that he'd left by taking that risk and get away and get a goal.
No,
it was on Klopp to take the risks that day, and he didn't take them.
United, it was on Mourinho to take the risk because United.
Hang on, Liverpool at home at Anfield, and the onus is on the away team.
It was on that day because United and City were neck and neck at that time. United were absolutely
So what are Man United?
flying.
But just supposed to blow the game?
United were flying.
Like City did.
United were flying. They would have beaten Liverpool if they'd gone for it because they had better players at the time and they were better form.
If it's come to a point where going to Anfield is a given...
What happened the week after, Neil? What happened the week after
If it comes to a point where going to Anfield... You're talking over me, Oliver.
Yeah, they lost at Huddersfield.
If it comes to a point where going to Anfield is a given for the away team, then Liverpool really are in trouble.
It's not a given, but at that time... You've got
to show a little bit of humility when you go to places like that and not think, I'm the better team, I'm going to take them apart. This is Liverpool at home at Anfield.
He blew it that day.
They blew it that day, and now they've got a point.
And now they're 12...
They've got a point. Man City lost.
And now they're 12
and you're
points
praising
behind.
Guardiola to the skies because he lost 4-3 because he stuck to his principles in the beautiful game.
I am,
And Mourinho got a point and you slaughtered him.
Yeah, because they're 12 points behind now.
Matt, are you still awake?
I'm enjoying this with everyone at home, I imagine.
I wasn't sure.
Yes, no.
I wasn't sure. What do you want to see when you go to see football matches?
I want to see these two fight.
Defensive masterclasses with Neil Custis or rampant attacking football with Oliver Holt?
When I go to football matches, I'll be honest, I want to see my team win if I'm going on...
And that's what most fans want.
And that's what most fans... And I take Neil's point on that. I read your tweet last night about a hard-working 1-0 win and Lukaku doing lots of running and thought Ollie must have been kicking himself. He was watching those first 22 minutes at the Emirates instead. Yeah. But, I mean, it's a different style. And the functionality is great, but it's like Ollie says, it's because United are in a different position at the minute. I don't think long-term, nicking 1-0 wins, going to Anfield to try and nick a 1-0 win, is going to keep United fans happy. United need to be dominating games with the size of the club in the same way that City are doing at the moment. And I can understand why Mourinho's in a transitional period, but I think he's got to get through that. This is perhaps what Sanchez is there for. But they had 2 shots on target last night. So great efficiency. They scored with 1 of them. But long term, you want to see better football week in, week out. It's the Stoke effect, if you like. They got bored with watching a team that was functional and just going about their business. So they've gone for a change to try and get more entertaining football, while, after years of success, just being difficult to beat. I think ultimately, and West Brom have been the same. Although, they've not picked up. I think the fans are enjoying the fact they're not just sitting across and defending quite so much.
I actually think the United fans deserve better. They're a rich man's Stoke at the moment. They're doing well. They're second, but the lack of ambition.
What do you mean lack of ambition?
The lack of ambition in the style.
They're second and they've just bought Sanchez or half £1 million a week. How's that a lack of ambition?
The lack of ambition in their playing style. Read Michael Owen's.
Do you know how many? I'd rather not.
Yeah.
But do you know how many times have they scored 4 goals against teams this season?
I know. That's
7,
one of your
8, 9 or something like that.
stats,
They've scored more goals than Tottenham. They've scored more goals than Arsenal. So if they're not showing ambition, what are they?
They don't show ambition in the biggest games. They don't show ambition in the biggest games.
What, because they don't go out hell for leather and lose?
Because
I tell you what,
Mourinho hasn't got the confidence in his players.
As a Newcastle fan, I wish we hadn't shown so much ambition at Anfield. In '96, I wish we hadn't showed that much ambition. I wish we hadn't showed that much ambition at Blackburn Rovers when we were 1-0 and lost 2-1.
So
I wish we hadn't shown. I would rather have played like Man United for those last 4 months.
So you see the Keegan years as an aberration, do you? You see that whole season which captivated the rest of football as a kind of aberration.
We blew it.
We blew it.
No.
I would rather have won the title than had any of those 4 threes.
But you wouldn't have won the title playing boring football.
Martin Hardy's book, some of the players in Martin Hardy's book, Touching Distance, to say, I still wouldn't have changed it for anything. Nonsense. So every Newcastle fan would have changed it for something. They would have changed it for that title.
They would have changed it for mid-table drudgery?
No, they would have changed it for winning the title.
Yeah, but Keegan could only play one way, so you're wishing away.
He could only play one way.
You're wishing away.
It was absolutely impossible. His actually defensive record wasn't actually that bad that season, to be fair. I think it was the second best in the league. The problem was, late on in that season, we blew games when we should have. When Chelsea won their last title under Mourinho, when they had a tremendous first half to the season, in the second half of the season, he effectively shut up shop to get them over the line. Had we done that, all right, it wouldn't be as memorable as when Newcastle played, but had we done that, we would have been Premier League title winners.
Neil, just a final point. I just want to ask you, why are you Mourinho's staunchest supporter? Certainly on this programme, certainly in the history of this programme, probably in the world.
Well, he's got a few rivals for that, to be fair.
After Mancini, I think. Because I think from covering Manchester United for a long time and seeing where they were going, I think he's done a fabulous job to get them back to where they are right now. Because I could see them really, after what happened under David Moyes, it was always going to be difficult for David Moyes because he was taking over a squad that wasn't as great as the title suggested and had a lot of work to do. But from where he started and from where Manchester United were to where he's got them now, I think he's done a great job, and I think he's got the spirit back. And I think the guy's just a genius. I really do. And you look at his record, and you look at what he did with Inter Milan, you look at what he did with Barcelona against with Real against that Barcelona team, what he did with Porto. I just think the bloke's a genius, and I think he's now, and he's done it with clubs where he hasn't started from a great position. Guardiola started from much better positions in the clubs he's taken over. Now, it's not to say Guardiola isn't a genius, he clearly is. But I just think Mourinho is the job he's doing at Man United is a very good one, and I think if they stick with him and continue to back him, they are going to get better and better, and City have to be careful and not be quite so blasé about giving them players like Sanchez.
Right. OK, that's cleared that up. Neil Custis, Jose Mourinho's biggest fan, wouldn't you know it? OK, next up, we're going to talk Arsenal, their transfer policy. They're starting to buy up players. Theo Walcott on his way out, though. He made his debut for Everton yesterday. More on them next. Welcome back with us this morning, Oliver Holt, Matt Dunn and Neil Custis. Neil, I thought you'd have been checking your phone in the break, just in case you got a text message from Mourinho or Rui Faria or someone from United.
I'm more concerned about Twitter.
Yeah. It's not good, don't look. Let's have a look at some of the papers. Ollie's column this morning. Scorn United for paying millions for Sanchez. Don't think so. It's a bargain, according to Ollie. I've just been talking about Sanchez and that move. Does it mean even more money, though, for Manchester United in wages? Hair of the Pog, back page of the Mirror this morning. Pogba in line for a pay rise to bring him to parity with Alexis Sanchez. Belting story here from Steve Bates. Love this. We've lost the cup. It's the plinth that Manchester United can't find. They've got to return the EFL Cup, which they won when they beat Southampton at Wembley last season. They need to find that somewhere along the line. Daniel Taylor, in his column this morning in The Observer, talking about Newcastle United, the failed move by Amanda Staveley to buy Newcastle United. £250 million was her last bid. Still on the table, apparently. Let's get on to Arsenal, though. Aubameyang on his way from Dortmund, we think, to Arsenal. We'll talk to Matt in a second about that. Arsenal, they looked good yesterday. Alexis Sanchez not even in the squad, travelling up to Manchester, but it didn't matter. Arsenal were 4-0 up against Palace at the Emirates after 22 miserable minutes for Palace fans. How good were Arsenal yesterday? Was this a reaction to Sanchez has gone, it's lifted the mood, and Arsenal getting back to basics and getting back in business?
I think only the fact it happened as such a whirlwind so early in the game suggested that, for whatever reason, the players were on their front foot. They'd said their goodbyes selectively late Friday night to Alexis. He'd gone. I think that was a cloud off their mind. And whatever.
What do you think that farewell would have been like?
Polite, I think.
Cordial.
Yeah, cordial, but not particularly. I don't think too many tears would have been shed.
Haven't seen so many tweets yet, have we?
No, exactly. Best of luck and all the rest of it. Yeah, no. It'll be interesting to see what happens when he comes back. For the first time. I think that was a weight. People were kind of fed up with the whole situation, so perhaps there was an element of that. They were aided and abetted by some horrendous Crystal Palace defending, to be fair, and took advantage of that. For 22 minutes, they were great. They won the match, and then in the beer match afterwards for 70 minutes, they lost 1-0. But I mean, the game had gone by then. But it was Arsenal. They'll do that in a game, but then they'll have another game where it won't happen. So to say that Sanchez, we don't need him, is ludicrous, and Mkhitaryan will fill that gap to a degree. But, as you hinted at, they still need a striker who can score 20 goals a season.
Is he coming?
The mood is really positive at Arsenal, and you don't often see that. I think they've got to land this one because there's no room in the team of players Wenger nearly signed for him, so they've got to actually get one across the line. There's a little bit of war of words stuff going on, but I think that's all a bit half-hearted and part of the game. My feeling is there's a will to show with a new sort of scouting regime at Arsenal that they want to get this deal done, and I think it's what they need because they really need, and it's going to be highlighted again. We've not really spoken about it for a couple of months, but they need Champions League football again. While Tottenham are going to Turin, they're off into the back end of Sweden next month, and they need to be in that top four. And those two signings will get them a better chance of being in that top four. But in the summer, they've then got to move on again and deal with the area that they still haven't dealt with, which is central midfield and defence. He's building a team again capable of finishing in the top four. But they're nowhere near title challengers.
You just totally turned Sweden into some horrendous country.
Well, Östersunds or Juventus, it's kind of that spells.
You obviously get invited on the press trip, which I would have gone on, but I'm actually in Turin watching.
Yeah, I'll be with you, Neil. So unfortunately, Tony's out there for us. So.
Neil, what happened to Mkhitaryan at Manchester United? Why didn't he perform? That's one of your mates' signings.
It has happened with other high-profile players who've come from the Shinji Kagawa was a classic example. Bundesliga Player of the Year, came over, and it just didn't happen for him either. It makes you actually wonder. Everyone raves on about the standard of the Bundesliga, and it is very competitive, and there's fan ownership and big crowds and all that sort of thing. But it makes you wonder: is it a big step up outside of Bayern Munich? Are the other teams all that? It didn't happen for him. He just looked lightweight. I mean, he's perfect for Arsenal because he just looks lightweight, and he'll play one good game in 10. And probably a few good ones in the Europa League. So in that sense, he's perfect for Arsenal. But he just didn't fit in. There's so many players at Manchester United who want to play number 10, and number 10 seems to be like this role where you don't have huge responsibilities, but you can spray the ball around and do nice little passes and all that. And, dare I say it, there was an onus on him to get back as well.
He's way too creative for Mourinho.
There was naughty Oliver. There was an onus on him to get back as well, which I don't think he took on board. The Manchester derby, the first half of that, the first one he played in, Mourinho was just like, oh, goodness me, what is he doing?
We didn't see him for weeks after that.
Well, I know, and he toughened him on the training ground and looked like he was coming back. I have to say, in the Europa League run particularly, and in the final, he was excellent. But maybe that sort of football suited him better. But certainly in you know, on days like yesterday at Burnley, Mkhitaryan would not suit that day. Paul Pogba suited that day yesterday. Matic suited that day. And there was too many days like that when Mkhitaryan was just flaky, really. But you're right, he did buy him. But, you know, Alex Ferguson bought Juan Varane, and he didn't suit. And he was regarded as one of the best players in the world at that point, and he didn't suit the Premier League because he didn't have any time on the ball. And the time the ball he had in Italy, he didn't have in the Premier League, and people were on his ankles, and he couldn't do what he could do best.
And when he got his move to Chelsea, it didn't work for him either, did
no,
it? With Varane.
Because he just didn't suit the Premier League, and some players just don't.
OK. Will Mkhitaryan suit Arsenal, Ollie, in the way that they play? They'll need more than one game in 10 out of him, though.
Yeah, I think Neil makes a fair point about that. I mean, I think he's certainly got a lot to prove. But I think he will suit Arsenal, and that's not meant as a slight on him. I think that I think if Arsenal get Mkhitaryan and Aubameyang, then that will not be a bad window for them. But it still doesn't quite camouflage the fact that they've, for the second time in a few years, they've lost their best player to Manchester United. You know, and for not, well, in this case, for no money, for a straight swap. So I don't buy they were brilliant yesterday, but it was against Crystal Palace, who were a struggling side, who have been a lot better, obviously, admittedly, since Roy Hodgson came in, but nevertheless are a struggling side. Doesn't camouflage the fact that losing Sanchez is a huge blow for Arsenal. I hope that Mkhitaryan succeeds, because I really like him as a player, but I know from Neil and United fans that he has, for whatever reason, whether Mourinho hasn't really fancied him in the end or shown enough faith in him, for whatever reason, he hasn't really done it at United. So he has plenty to prove at Arsenal, and I hope he does it.
What about Walcott, Matt? Sold by Arsenal early this week, played for Everton yesterday, made his debut at Goodison Park in their draw with West Brom, an assist for the goal as well, for the equaliser. How will we look back at his Arsenal career?
I think it's been a frustrating slow burner. He's never really known what position he likes. He's never known, you know, is he a wide player through the middle? He's changed his mind over what he is. Wenger's changed his mind several times. So much was expected, certainly unfairly, when he was a 16-year-old. He was supposed to take the whole English game and, you know, win us World Cups and all sorts. And, you know, at 16, you don't know how players are going to develop.
Sorry, Matt, who whipped that up? Who's responsible for that? Are we responsible?
Well, ultimately,
Sven to a degree, by picking him in that World Cup squad.
Having never played a game.
Having never played a game.
Yeah,
and that gave everyone the excuse to say, well, you know, he must be something, because that's unprecedented. You know, he must be that good. I mean, as you, all of you probably know better than me, at that time, I remember in 2006, some of the senior players felt that it wasn't fair.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that it wasn't fair.
They almost sympathised with Walcott,
yeah, they did.
The position he found himself in, because he wasn't ready.
Yeah, I think he's been a terrific player for Arsenal. He's, you know, by most standards, he's had a fantastic career at Arsenal. I mean, I think he's suffered a little bit by the fact that his spell at Arsenal has coincided with this spell of underachievement, or where they've fallen from the heights that they were before. So I suppose in the public mind somewhere he's probably associated with that. But, you know, anybody who plays the amount of first-team games he's played for Arsenal and in the Premier League, and has made a lot of England appearances, that's a good career.
He scored in cup finals, hasn't he? So, I mean, in a different era, that, you know, that might be part of a tapestry of success that he's been part of. But, yeah, it's like Ollie says, it's been the wrong time for him. He's never been strong enough. It's interesting, I think, talking about being unfair on him as a 16-year-old, the recent England players that have come through have done well, particularly for club players. Jamie Vardy, for instance, Harry Kane. They've all emerged quite late, actually, into the spotlight. And I think that's made a big difference in terms of how they've been able to deal with it.
Yeah, we do ask a lot.
Like
When you think of Xavi and Iniesta both on the bench for the Champions League final in 2006, I think they were 23.
You would have still expect Walcott to progress more than he has, wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, he's still a player with potential at 28 or however old he is now.
Yeah.
I tell you what, it's worth mentioning briefly. He's one of the nicest people you meet in football, actually.
Yeah,
and most helpful
yeah,
throughout.
Yeah, there's a lot of
the
humility, certainly, about Theo Walcott, who started for Everton yesterday, made his debut. Let's move on to Chelsea and some of the players they've been linked with. Andy Carroll's one of them at West Ham. Of course, Carroll's injury means that deal probably won't happen. But is Andy Carroll, realistically, a player that Chelsea should be looking at? Peter Crouch, of course, in the twilight of his career. He won't thank me for saying that because he watches the programme, but he is coming towards the end at Stoke City. Are they the type of players that Chelsea should be looking at?
I mean, I'm surprised. He's clearly putting out a signal there that he needs a physical presence up front. And Andy Carroll, without injury, would be, Harry Kane. For me, because he was that good when I first saw him at Newcastle. His ability in the air, not just to head the ball on, but to direct the ball with his head to people as a pass. He passed the ball with his head superbly. And on the floor, people just think he's a big guy who holds the ball up. On the floor, he's superb as well. But the problem is, and it's not rocket science, I'm not telling anyone new here, if you're constantly getting injured and you don't get a run of games, you're not going to fulfil yourself. And you have to wonder, why is Andy Carroll getting all these injuries? Why is it happening? Is it just bad luck? Or, I mean, for me, he doesn't always look the super fittest striker in the world to me. So you have to wonder why he's getting all these injuries. But Andy Carroll, not injured, with a run of games, I can totally understand any team wanting him, probably outside Manchester City. I can totally understand any team wanting him.
And Crouchy?
Yeah. Well, Crouchy, I think he's different because, I mean, I would have to disagree briefly on Andy Carroll. I don't think he's got the football brain to be a really top player because I remember watching...
Why, because he's a Geordie, is that what you're saying?
I don't remember mentioning that. No.
We don't discriminate on this show.
I was going to say, I don't think it's got much to do with that.
I've got to have a word with you.
No, it's based on the fact that one of watching, I think it was one of Pardew's last games at Bolton, at Newcastle, Kevin Davis played him off the park by having a far less talent, less abilities, but far better brain. So that, I think, has hampered Carroll as much as his physical problems.
Why don't you think that? Because
I don't agree with you with his ability to pass with his head quite...
I just think, in the air with his head, I just thought he was superb with the way he put players in.
Whenever I've seen him, I think too many balls go missing and don't land at feet. And I just remember one particular game where you had Davis at one... You'd have loved it, Ollie. Kevin Davis at one end, Andy Carroll at the other, ball never on the ground. But Kevin Davis was just head and shoulders better at finding...
Kevin Davis out of retirement, how about that?
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, it's funny you mentioned Peter Crouch, but I walked up to the, full of stories of Peter Crouch, went to the press conference at the Chelsea training ground on Friday, walked around the corner and saw Joe Cole and thought, crikey, how far back is the clock is he going to turn? You need someone, obviously, to lump the ball up to Crouchy. Yeah. But why not? Yeah, he may not be as quick as he was 10 years ago, but he's still 6'7", and... you've got to have 7 players
just round the corner.
Yeah, absolutely, dead handy. You've got to have 7 players on the bench, so why not have some different options? OK,
we'll see if we find out. Well, Chelsea's options are pretty limited at the moment, but maybe they will sign Peter Crouch. Thanks, guys. Next up, we're going to talk... you'll be happy about this. Newcastle. Amanda Staveley. And your favourite, Mike Ashley. It's coming next. Newcastle United.
I've had to double.
OK, Neil, I don't know how this is going to sit with you, your new image as a hipster and trendy dad, but you are trending on Twitter this morning.
Oh, I mean, why?
What
have I said?
How does that fit with your new image?
I don't know, it's difficult.
Is you comfortable with it?
Is it for good things?
It depends what it's for.
I think it's about the Manchester United chat. I think it's about your love for Jose Mourinho.
Oh, is it? Oh, right, OK.
I would imagine so.
OK, well, I'll nervously look at that later on, then.
I think we all nervously look at Twitter these days, don't we? OK, let's move on. Let's talk Newcastle United. Amanda Staveley, Mike Ashley. War of words has broken out, the Mike Ashley camp. And, of course, there's been briefings this week, left, right and centre about it. Amanda Staveley's interview with George Caulkin in The Times at the weekend. Where do you sit with this?
Well, I know...
We believe £250 million on the table, take it or leave it. Mike Ashley said, you know what, leave it.
I mean, initially she didn't want to say anything. And it was only late that night before the paper the next morning where she decided that she did want to come out because she was being painted as very much, you know, the person in the wrong in all this, saying, you know, with Ashley suggesting she wasn't taking it seriously.
The self-publicist element would have harmed her, wouldn't it?
People saying that she didn't have the financial backers anymore, that they pulled out, that she wasn't taking it seriously. She does take it seriously. She has offered 250 million. He says it's not enough. He wants 350 million on the nose. They will give him 350 million, but it's 250 million up front plus 50 and then 50 in later instalments based on this, that or the other. And that's where
staying up, you would assume, be one of them.
Staying up and Rafa staying is part of it. And that is the sticking point, and neither side are going to move. But to say she's not taking it seriously is wrong. She is taking it seriously. She wants to get it done. But Mike Ashley is stubborn, as we know. He's been stubborn all along at Newcastle United. He's been one of the worst things to happen to Newcastle United, you know, in its recent history, and continues to be.
I don't see too many other people putting £170 million in interest-free loans at St James's Park, though.
Well, she will. I mean, you know, she'll come along. She'll come along with the money. I think it's just been difficult. He's been difficult to deal with, and that was always going to be the case. I don't know why he doesn't. You know, he's not going to make a loss out of this. But I actually think that Manchester United. I mean, Newcastle United.
Let it go, Neil.
The only thing I would defend him on is, I think Newcastle United is worth 350 million on the nose. It is worth that in modern day football. So, you know, come up with 350 million, just give him it, get him out, take over, and let's get on with it, because it is worth that. I mean, it's a 54,000 every week Premier League football club. Build the other stand opposite if ever that university building goes away, and I'm not against Grade 2 listed buildings, but, you know, if they shifted it would have a bigger capacity. And you're suddenly getting 60,000, 65,000 in. If it starts doing well, the potential is enormous. We've heard this time and time again. I know the expectation is not off the scale as people from outside Newcastle suggest about Newcastle fans. They just want a bit of hope. They want to be, no, I'm not going to say entertained. They want a bit of hope. They want to see winning football. And they want someone at the helm of the football club that has the same dreams as they have, whether they become reality or not, but has those same dreams. But I do think, you know, Amanda Staveley, if she has the money, just give them the 350 million, get them out and just...
Sorry to interrupt, guys. Just want to bring a bit of breaking news, actually, because Watford have taken the unusual step of sacking another manager. This time it's Marco Silva. They've just done it.
Someone just said they'd be all right 20 minutes ago, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they're getting the guy in from Malaga. And I know that it was unexpected, but the reaction to that, because it's all gone wrong since.
Yeah.
The flirtation with the Everton job, hasn't it? But Watford, they have just sacked Marco Silva, so we should get a reaction from the guys on that.
Well, I mean, actually, my first reaction to that, as you just alluded to there, is what a spectacular fall from grace it is for Marco Silva, who was being touted as the sort of best thing to hit the Premier League for a long time, the new Pochettino, etc. And as you say, since that flirtation they had before, which I believe, you know, didn't go down well at all at Watford, things have gone spectacularly wrong. So it is surprising, given that he's only been there for a short time, but in the modern climate, then after a run of games like that, and where I think fans and clearly the board have become disillusioned with him, I suppose there's a logic to it.
We just to remind you, Watford have just sacked Marco Silva. The Watford statement doesn't mention Everton, but mentions an unwarranted approach from a Premier League rival. Around that time, I just got the sense that Marco Silva puffed himself up a little bit too much, having taken a team down last season when he had an opportunity, had enough time to keep them up, and it has been done in the Premier League in the past by other managers. Sam Allardyce with Crystal Palace, Tony Pulis with Crystal Palace. That Silva perhaps had that sort of sense of entitlement and belonging, or that he was the coming man.
I don't want to be a jinx to him, but last time I was sat around this table... It doesn't matter,
he's just been sacked. So.
It was just there. but yeah, too late for him. But last time I sat around this table, we were discussing, it was right at the heart of those allegations, and we all agreed, I think, at the time, he's got to do it for a season to do it. And do it well. You know, he got relegated, let's not forget. And I think this is what's happened. He believed perhaps his own press a little bit too much that was around at the time. And Yeah, managing a club is a difficult job. It can go right and it can also go horribly wrong. And it was me who said earlier when we were discussing earlier that I think Watford will be all right. I think they've got enough within the club, enough Premier League nous to keep them safe this year. But that's not necessary to say they don't need a bit more direction. It's awful when managers lose their job, but it has been so bad recently that in a division where everyone seems to be trying to get relegated and shoot themselves in the foot, they seem to be winning that race at the minute.
Is there no way back from manager who's 10th in the table? OK, they've been on the slide for the last few weeks and they lost at Leicester yesterday. But why isn't there a way back for a manager that Watford have just appointed? They clearly had the sentiment that they had the belief and the conviction to appoint this guy in the first place. An ego's so swollen and so big that they can't sit around the table and say, look, we could have done without you trying to go to Everton 3 weeks into the job, whatever it was, but let's start over again.
Don't you think it's the players, though, the way they treat a manager? I've covered clubs where the manager has believed he's the best thing since sliced bread. And players don't like that because they're the ones who actually, when it's going well...
Name names.
You know my history of which patches I've covered, up in Yorkshire in particular. And players don't like it if they're the ones putting in the performances and the manager's taking all the credit. Then they don't like that either. So when you lose the dressing room, you can be quite brutal and quick that they suddenly stop doing it for you.
You just didn't like that manager because you were covering him every week, and then he'd come up from London, and that manager would come to the press conference and say, "Hello, Oliver, how are you doing?"
You know who I'm talking about, yes.
Neil, what's next for Silva? It's going to take him a little while to get over this, I would have thought, because he's had 2 Premier League jobs within the space of 6 months. But we did have this sense last season that he took a team down, but charmed everyone, didn't he? Charmed the nation. Yeah,
I mean, it'll probably be top of the list for the next job, you know, when someone below him sacks their manager. You know, it makes you wonder what do the Bournemouth board think about Eddie Howe, who's a point behind, or, you know, Huddersfield, who David Wagner was doing a great job there, 2 points behind. Brighton, Chris Hughton, who's done a marvellous job there, 3 points behind. So, and I'm not, you know, they are all great managers who should stay in their jobs, but I think Silva 10th, yes, it had taken a downturn, but I think Matt made a very good point with the players. I think now, more than ever, if the sort of impetus goes the other way, what's the opposite of impetus? If you start going on the slide, I think it's very easy for players to hide, you know, and if a manager comes under a little bit of pressure, it's very easy for players to hide. And, you know, there's almost like a shelf life for managers now of, I don't know, maximum 4 years. Probably.
Did you say 4 months?
Well, you know, 4 months, but I'm saying maximum 4 years. But it seems to be the player power now, I think, is probably greater than ever at these clubs, and they can get rid of managers. I mean, I hate to go back to it. Well, I do want to go back to it, but you know, Manchester City players who Roberto Mancini got to win the title and the FA Cup.
You couldn't do one show, could you?
But they got rid of him.
Couldn't go 90 minutes.
I'm just waiting to find out what he's going to think. How he thinks Jose's going to do in
the
year 4.
The City players got rid of him after they won the title. Then the following season finished second and got to an FA Cup final, and that was at Manchester City. So if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere.
What does Roberto Mancini feel about your love for Mourinho?
We haven't discussed it. He's in St Petersburg at the minute, doing a very good job, I think.
OK, that's Marco Silva. Well, it should have been about Marco Silva. Somehow it got turned into Roberto Mancini. I despair sometimes of this man, but we do love having him on, really. Watford are going to make a swift appointment, apparently, to replace Marco Silva. I think Jose Lopez at Malaga will get that job. That's just a prediction. Next up, we're going to talk VAR. Chaos at Chelsea in the week in their FA Cup replay against Norwich. Right, last week we talked about VAR. The week before that we talked about VAR. Let's talk more VAR. You were at Chelsea on Wednesday night. I was there watching it with some friends high up in the East Stand. I didn't even know VAR had even been used during the game. You were in the press box, Matt, reporting on the game against Norwich. Did you know?
Not absolutely, no, if I'm honest. It was absolute chaos.
Well, that's crazy.
You know what deadlines are like midweek anyway. Extra time wasn't helping any of that. The flow of information was appalling. There was rumours that for the Willian incident that it hadn't been used. Categorically, it didn't appear to be being used in anything. Every so often he would actually seem to listen to his earpiece and then give a corner in a different way, but obviously that's not a VAR incident. He's talking to his linesman. There was just no communication. I mean, I don't know who's responsible for that. Ultimately, if IFAB want this to go through and FIFA want this to go through, they've got to manage the situation better. What we've got to remember is that football doesn't just exist in England. This has been happening elsewhere. But in terms of this country, to try and introduce something mid-season when no one's been properly briefed on what's going on, I think it's been an absolute car crash just on the information. What I would also say, and you talking about last 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about it for the future because it's here to stay. There's no question that football needs some sort of video referees, and it's the management of that process that we've just got to get right, because you can't have, you know, big money decisions, big title decisions being made by a bloke running around, puffing around behind elite players. And referees are as fit as anybody. I'm not going to start throwing those stones. But, you know, it is an impossible job, and we've recognised that for a long time, and the game's got faster. And
healthy breakfast this morning.
Absolutely, banana, yeah.
We'll ignore the three
fresh ones
you had
perhaps
before
next
the show
week.
Started.
But you can't keep doing that. You need the vision. You need the time to think about it. What we also need to know is that process is happening, and we know that now, in the cold light of day, after all the briefings did finally happen, that it did happen in all those events. It was looked at. The guy, Mike Jones, back in Premier League HQ in his bunker, did tell the referee, I've done a check, you're in the clear, it's fine. Whether you agree with that decision, again, is semantics. Conte obviously didn't agree with the Willian decision. But looking at it, if the referee had given it live as a perhaps not as a dive, but as a non-penalty, there would have been an argument to be had, and that's kind of what's always going to be at the centre of this. This isn't going to cure everything. It's not going to give black and white answers. It's just going to help people give more informed grey answers.
Well, yeah. Is it designed... Should it protect the integrity of the competition, Ollie, or should it enhance the spectacle?
Well, I think it should make games fairer. I think it should make the outcomes of games fairer. I don't agree with Matt, actually, that it's been a car crash. I think there are bound to be teething problems to begin with, and I think that's what we're seeing. I mean, I think there are issues here about how much, or as you quite rightly pointed out, how little the fans are included in the process at the moment. I think that needs to be changed. I mean, in other sports, particularly in tennis, you know, when that system is used, and the fans are very much a part of it, and in rugby too. So I think that's something they need to look at. But I think generally, nothing has changed for me. I'm a huge fan of VAR. I think, as Matt said, it's the way forward. That, you know, it's dark ages stuff that we don't use video technology. It's not going to get everything right, but it's going to get more. It's going to get more things right than it gets wrong. And
can I just clarify? I was just saying it was a car crash on Wednesday night at Chelsea. It worked brilliantly, and we saw why we needed it for that Leicester goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, I thought it was a penalty. The Willian thing, a lot of other people don't. So, you know, I think people were worried that that VAR will somehow dampen controversy in the game. We're talking about the decisions just as much, but I still think that it can only be a good thing that a referee sitting somewhere else, and possibly then the referee on the night as well, has an opportunity to look at something, to look at replays of something. It can only be a good thing. There will still be debates about whether they get it right or wrong, but they've got a better chance. Referees have got a better chance of getting it right with VAR.
Neil, the problem I've got with it is the integrity of the competitions is, oh, we'll use it for this semi-final of the Carabao Cup between Chelsea and Arsenal. Oh, but we're not going to use it for the other semi-final between Bristol City and Manchester City.
Because they haven't got the facilities
because they haven't got the facilities.
Yeah.
So we are, to my mind, devaluing
the comes to the cost, doesn't
it? And the same with the FA Cup. Oh, Chelsea have got a replay against Norwich, so let's experiment against poor little Norwich. Yeah,
well, I mean, the Scottish League have said they're not going to use it because basically the cost, haven't they? Yes, I agree with you that it's either all in or not in, but it is hugely expensive to do it. But, you know, I look at the Sterling penalty yesterday, you know, and I've seen it about 5 times, and I'm still not totally convinced whether it was a penalty, and I don't see how the VAR would be totally convinced. So you're always going to get situations like that. And you're still going to get, despite this, apart from offside, and obviously the ball crossing the line, where managers will say, well, you know, we've seen it on the video how he doesn't think that's a penalty, and you're still going to get the same complaints coming in. But I agree with everything Oliver said there, only time I have, but you have to restrict it to the goal line and probably those offsides, because you're going to get managers saying, well, there was a foul 20 minutes earlier in the build-up to this and all that, and I know there's certain restrictions. I mean, one thing that they did wrong, I think, in the midweek is that they've done a briefing, the VAR people or whoever it was, have done a briefing with the broadcasters, but haven't included the print journalists within that to fully explain how this thing's going to work and what have you, which is why we're now having a debate which is being seen on television.
We have had
a press briefing,
but it wasn't a briefing. It wasn't a briefing for every working journalist in the country.
No, right.
It was one journalist from each newspaper. I only say that because I was there.
Yeah, OK.
So there has been a briefing.
But I was never a fan of it coming in. I was only a fan of it coming in for...
You should have called me straight away, Neil. I'd have filled you in on that briefing.
I was only a fan of crossing the line of that, because I do think it slows the game down. I mean, one of the reasons I don't watch the Super Bowl as much as I love American football is because it goes on so long and it goes on forever and it's stop and start and those blokes throwing their yellow hankies on the floor and all this sort of thing. I mean, I know you love all that, Ollie, and I can understand it because the occasion and the spectacle's great.
He's not going to rise to this. I cannot
he's going to have another dip about defensive football.
I cannot sit there for 4 hours watching a game.
It's not going to be like, and this is where they're trying to steer.
But it will get longer and longer.
Masterclass.
It feels like 4 hours, perhaps, when it's Mourinho. This is why FIFA are trying to steer the path through it. I mean, for all that you could see on Chelsea, Stamford Bridge was Chelsea players doing this all the time. Yeah. If you read the protocols, that's a yellow card offence now.
Oh, right.
No yellow cards were shown. He showed plenty for simulation. That's a yellow card offence.
What if he just went like that?
Yeah. Well, perhaps if you did two, or you did a film or a book or a play. So that's a yellow card offence, so that should stop it. It is up to the guy sat in the booth to recommend to the referee, you might want to have another look at that. So there's only going to be, and it's only for penalties, for goal incidents, mistaken identity and offsides. So there aren't going to be every 2 minutes us stopping.
Clear and obvious error.
And it's got to be. Well, that's because that's how controversial it is. The FA were briefing the following day after the Chelsea game that he should have said it was a clear and obvious error. You speak to IFAB, individuals within IFAB who were looking at it, and they say, well, no, do you know what? It wasn't that clear or obvious. So even the people trying to implement the systems don't agree on what a clear and obvious error is.
I don't want to introduce too much of a sort of scattergun approach to it, but I am slightly surprised. Neil mentioned the NFL. I'm slightly surprised that they haven't gone, at least incorporated in some degree, that the system they have in the NFL where a coach is allowed 2 challenges per match, because that would get rid of the kind of coaches going like that, because they are allowed.
Does he see it on the screen?
They are allowed to. No, they have to. They have to make a decision whether they want to challenge a decision, and so. I think that will be something to look at amongst the many things.
OK. Unfortunately, guys, time's got the better of us. Fascinating chat, though, as ever, from the boys. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Ollie, Matt and Jose's PR man, Neil Custis. Thanks for being here.